Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers. Tonight, the Georgia State Senate remains in session at this hour. They continue to debate the bill to limit abortions after 20 weeks, the point where bill supporters say fetuses could feel pain. If passed, changes will have to be worked out with the House. Current state law allows abortions through 26 weeks. The debate's been going on since 4 o'clock this afternoon. Final passage of the state's $19.2 billion 2013 budget is near. The compromise bill includes millions more dollars for technical colleges and universities. Members of the conference committee said the final version will be up for votes in both chambers tomorrow. More action in state charter schools today as the Senate considers legislation establishing funding mechanisms for the schools. The bill includes a provision that local public school funds will not be redirected to fund charter schools. The General Assembly has already granted final passage to the constitutional amendment to allow state charter schools, which will appear on ballots in November. And tax reform has been a long time coming to Georgia. The comprehensive measure that lowers some income taxes, repeals the sales and ad valorem tax on new cars, and imposes an internet sales tax achieved final passage last week. I'll be joined on set by Dr. Roger Taro, economics professor at Mercer University and a member of the Special Counsel on Tax Reform. These are big changes to the tax code that affect each family and business in the state. You'll want to hear this. For Monday, March 26, 2012, the 38th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly, this is Primetime Lawmakers. Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Let's go live to the Capitol where Sasha Horn reports the Senate continues to debate the bill to ban abortions after 20 weeks.
Hi, Scott. We're closing in on 4 hours of debates as senators testify for and against the bill that would make it illegal to get an abortion after 20 weeks unless the life of the mother is at stake. Senator Tommy Williams spoke in favor of the measure.
House Bill 954 creates a legislative finding that there's substantial evidence that an unborn child is capable of experiencing pain by at least 20 weeks after fertilization. Moreover, the General Assembly asserts a compelling state interest in protecting the lives of unborn children from the stage at which substantial medical evidence indicates that they're capable of feeling pain.
Now, after Williams took his seat, Democrat after Democrat after Democrat took the well against the bill. Several of them shared stories from constituents where the fetus would have died and the mental anguish that would have been taken place for the mother carrying that baby to term and having to answer questions in public, for example. Opponents like Senator Doug Stoner also criticized the bill, saying that if it becomes law, they should make exceptions in the case of rape and incest.
You know, I may be I'm a minority in this chamber. I'm also a minority at home. You know, my wife and 2 daughters. And to sit here and have the state tell me and my family and my daughter and my wife on an issue like this, God forbid one member of my family got raped, that you're not going to give any exceptions. It's definitely hypocrisy. It's definitely politics. It's hiding the fact that we haven't dealt with the real issues that most Georgians are concerned about. It's an admission of failure of leadership, of current leadership in this chamber.
Well, Scott, Democrats did not have the vote, so they say that they were going to introduce amendments, and the Senates are currently voting on those amendments at this time, Scott.
All right, thanks very much, Sasha. Keep an eye on that. The debate continues here as we move into the final days of the Georgia General Assembly. A bill defining what a vicious dog is passed out of the Senate today. Sponsored by Representative Gene Maddox, a former veterinarian. The legislation would allow judges to order the euthanasia of those classified as vicious dogs in cases of attack. A change in the Senate to the legislation further defining a working dog, police dogs or assistance dogs whose breed may be on the vicious dogs list, sends the bill back to the House. As most of you probably know, this is the final week of the 2012 legislative session, and Lawmakers is your home for complete Capitol coverage till the gavels come down and beyond. On Sine Die, the final day of the session, Thursday, we'll present our regular 7 p.m. broadcast, but that will be the end of our coverage that day. We'll be back on the air from 11 p.m. to the moment of Sine Die, shortly after midnight, with live House and Senate coverage and analysis of the all-important final day. And then on Friday night at 7, we'll present our legislative wrap-up show. I'll be joined for in-depth analysis by Sandra Parrish, Tom Crawford, Aaron Haynes, and Jim Galloway, some of the best Capitol reporters around. That's 3 Sine Die shows, Thursday at 7 and 11 and Friday at 7, all part of our unmatched legislative coverage only on GPB. Now we go back to the Capitol, where primetime lawmaker Sandra Parrish says there's an agreement on the 2013 budget. Sandra.
That's right, Scott. Budget conferees worked throughout the weekend to iron out their differences and then met early this morning to make it official. Representative Terry England, chair of the House Appropriations Committee, tells me there were just a few details that needed to be worked out in the $19.2 billion spending plan.
There were two big items dealing with technical colleges. We softened a cut there in instruction. Should help them about $1 million, about a $2.5 million cut that the Senate had placed in Regents. Took it back out. Several technical colleges will be doing some expansions. Some of our Regents, some of the colleges, Institutes of Higher Learning will be doing some expansions. Just, a lot of what we felt like were really good things for Georgia.
And remember that $100 million from the mortgage fraud multi-state settlement? England says that money has been included as well.
The state of Georgia, of course, has been awarded about $99 million in the mortgage fraud settlement. The governor wanted to and asked us to put that money into REBA and One Georgia, which will deal with economic development. We felt like that the best use of that money was to put it into economic development, to create jobs, help people be able to find jobs, make mortgage payments, those kind of things.
The 2013 budget will go before both the House and Senate tomorrow for a vote to agree to the conference committee report before sending it on to the governor. Last week the state Senate gave final passage to a constitutional amendment that would allow for state-approved charter schools if voters sign off in November. Well, last week I asked Governor Nathan Deal, who supports the measure, if he'll be working to persuade voters to approve it.
This is an opportunity for parents and communities to have another option in terms of public education. These are public schools, and they will be under the jurisdiction of the state of Georgia and under the supervision of the entities of the state of Georgia, and they will simply be another step to try to improve the quality of education for our students.
The bill, including the funding mechanism for those schools, is still on the calendar in the Senate this evening. The House approved a bill today to leave it up to local school boards whether to require online courses for their students. Representative Mike Dudgeon says the bill was changed from the original version in the Senate that would have mandated each student take an online course before they graduate.
Online education is taking off. It's probably by far the fastest growing way of delivering education. And we want and we sincerely believe that online education provides another tool in the toolbox which really helps facilitate learning for our kids. It allows students perhaps in a rural area to get access to one of the very best, say, AP physics teachers in the whole state, which would just not really be possible before.
The bill passed 125 to 33 and now goes back to the Senate to agree to the changes. The House also passed a bill to make the false reporting of a crime a felony.
What this does is actually allows a capturing of those who would indirectly cause law enforcement or in a false submitting of a report of a crime in which would cause law enforcement to spend resources to catch the purported crime. This comes out of the Catch Me Killer from a year or so ago, in which he made specific relations to existing crimes in which the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and other law enforcement agencies had to spend resources to find out it was a hoax. This simply allows the indirect communication to police as opposed to it being only direct communication.
The bill passed 154 to 5 and now goes back to the Senate to agree to the changes. Well, going on right now outside the Capitol is a massive crowd gathered over the death of Florida teenager Trayvon Martin. The rally was organized by Atlanta's historically black colleges, but people of all races have spilled into the streets around the Capitol, many wearing hoodies, including some legislators themselves. The case of the unarmed teenager who was shot after a confrontation with a neighborhood watchman in a subdivision in Sanford, Florida last month has gained national attention. So far, no charges have been filed against George Zimmerman, who says he shot Martin in self-defense.
I mean, I think it was definitely racially motivated, and I think it was because, like, that stereotype of, like, that guy in a hoodie equals thug, like, and that's not right.
I think it's very unfair what happened. Clearly, this unarmed kid was just on his way home, and this self-appointed community cop overreacted.
An injustice has been done to Trayvon. He could be my son, anyone's son, and we're just tired of it. We're tired of it. This type of thing happens all the time to people of color, and I just don't think he's been treated fair.
And Scott, we've heard that crowd has grown now to more than 1,500. As you can imagine, security is heightened all around the Capitol, but so far no word of any problems.
Well, this will certainly prompt an examination of Georgia's Stand Your Ground law, and certainly do that. Thank you very much, Sandra. A measure that seeks to bring more fairness to the way teachers are paid achieves final passage today. The legislation says that teachers who cheat will no longer benefit. Senator John Albers explains.
Today we've got a good bill to help assure that any teacher or education professional who has been engaging in cheating or other nefarious acts will have to pay back any bonuses or salary increase that were directly related to such cheating. I think we can all agree that most all of our teachers work hard. It's a true calling to be an educator, and we thank them for all their hard work. And those who have done wrong should not give a black eye to all those who are doing the right thing.
The bill passes and now goes to the governor. Let's throw to the state Senate now. Looks like they're about to vote on the fetal pain abortion bill that will limit abortions to 20 weeks in Georgia. Let's take a look.
44th, your light just came on. What purpose is it on for? It's accident. All those that Senator from the 41st, what purpose
Mr. President,
state your inquiry.
Isn't it true that Georgia and the Georgia legislature should start investing in children of all ages to try to save lives in Georgia?
All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine.
They're voting.
For
they're voting now.
Purposes.
And this is the highly controversial bill.
From the 44th is recognized.
Mr. President, isn't it true that
these are live pictures from the state Senate?
Women, and wouldn't you agree with me that House Bill 954 is bad for Georgia women and their families?
It's a passage by substitute means it would have to go back to the House. It's not the identical language of the House version that passed, HB 954. And we're not seeing any of those votes tally at this point.
And that's the role of the
It prohibits abortions after 20 weeks in the state of Georgia with very few exceptions. It's been a real flashpoint. "13 seconds left in the voting here. These are live pictures of the state Senate now. This is one of the more controversial issues we've seen. More than 3 hours of debate in the state Senate today on this
on the passage
what's called the fetal pain bill.
The yeas are 36 and the nays are 19. And this
it does
bill,
pass.
Therefore, Adams Rex constitutional majority is therefore passed.
It does pass. And since it's by substitute, that means the language says that they'll have to go back to the House for consideration here in the last 2 days of the General Assembly. The city of Brookhaven could soon be incorporated. The Senate today passed a measure that would create the newest and third largest city of the state, but some believe the measure will disenfranchise voters.
This bill circumvents the local delegation, and it really disenfranchises the voters. The only conclusion I can come to is perhaps those in this area want to separate themselves from a majority black county that's governed to their own white city. The bill passed along party lines. Originally, the legislation named the new city Ashford. The Senate has changed the name to Brookhaven. That changed since the measure back to the House. In 2010, the Georgia General Assembly decided to undertake a thorough study of Georgia's taxation and revenue system. Legislation passed that year, creating a special council on tax reform and fairness for Georgians and a special joint committee on revenue structure. These groups were tasked with tax reform. Last week, we saw the first tax reform legislation sail through the House and Senate in a mere 3 legislative days. Here to talk more about what is in that bill and what is not is Dr. Roger Taro, professor of economics at Mercer University and member of the Special Council on Tax Reform and Fairness. Dr. Taro, it's great to have you back on GPB to talk about this.
It's great to be here, Scott.
Now, we ran through the garden a couple of times here in its nascent phase while you all were meeting, A.D. Frazier and the group were trying to put this thing together. What was the original goal of this commission? What were you trying to do?
Well, I think our charge really was about looking broadly at how we collect tax revenues in Georgia and talking about how we can update this tax system to be really one that's more competitive in the 21st century. But kind of an overarching theme was about economic growth and creating jobs.
And as far as those goals were concerned, what did you get in the tax reform package that passed, and what are you missing?
Well, I think we've got some progress. I was very happy to see the bill include an exemption from sales tax for energy used in manufacturing, mining, and agricultural interests in our state. That was very consistent with one of our overarching themes that we don't want to see a tax applied on business inputs. We also see some construction supplies will be exempted from a tax. Both those will be pro-growth. But particularly in the manufacturing space, I think this will go a long way toward helping helping Georgia create and retain businesses in that sector.
Now, as far as what you didn't get, we're going to go through some of these specifically in just a moment, but just a broad view. Some things you might have been missing, things that you'd hoped would happen that will have to wait.
Well, I didn't really expect that we would get it through this session, but I do hope that over the longer run, we will be able to broaden the base for the sales tax, take the revenue from that, and buy down the marginal tax rate on personal income. As we went around the state, one of the things that we grew to understand was it is the marginal tax rate on personal income that particularly impacts entrepreneurs and how they make the decision about where they locate and if, in fact, they stay in Georgia when they're successful.
Now, let's face it, we're surrounded with states that don't have a state income tax.
It certainly puts us at a competitive disadvantage versus Florida and Tennessee.
So what would it take to push that number down? Will we have to go get sales taxes on services? Will we have to find a way to tax food sales?
Well, I think we understood that the sales tax on food was going to be very politically unpopular. I like to refer to it as not exactly a Dale Carnegie moment for the commission. But I think that our best chance is to broaden the sales tax, to apply it on services in those industries where the infrastructure is already there to collect those revenues.
All right. One of the goals we heard about along the way was to bring the tax code into the 21st century. Georgia's tax code is an antique. I think in the old code you charge a $5 fee to open a new airport, for instance. Did this package achieve any of that? Did they actually go in and clean up some of the old stuff?
Well, probably not as broad-based as we would hope to see. When you think about how our economy's changed over time, when we first put in place our tax code, the majority of the economy was goods producing. Now the majority of the economy is service producing, and that trend will continue. That's one of the reasons we advocated for broadening the sales tax. But I do think you saw some changes in how we collected tax revenue, for example, upon automobiles. Hopefully going down the road, we'll look at the insurance premium tax, we'll look at the telecommunication tax, both areas that the commission felt relatively strong about.
Well, let's talk about that, the motor vehicle tax reform. That is one of the biggest changes people are going to see. Moving away from an ad valorem tax on cars based on their value to a one-time fee or tax that you charge on title transfers.
Right. And one of the things that we would hope to accomplish with that is to level the playing field between kind of casual sales of automobiles versus those that are purchased through larger facilities. I think it's a move toward fairness on that. I think that most of the studies show that citizens don't like the kind of birthday taxes you get with ad valorem. And so I think that we may make some progress in terms of that component of the reform.
Did you get some pushback from local governments who depend on that monthly cash flow from ad valorem taxes? All those birthdays come up all year long. I mean, did you get some pushback on that? And will it be equitable for local governments?
Well, in the final form of the bill that passed through, they're attempting to offset any loss that the locals will have. I will tell you that at the commission level, we took as one of our charges to hold the locals harmless with regard to changes that we made. We did not want to shift the burden of taxes down to the counties and the municipalities, and I think in most cases that will still be accomplished.
There was some tinkering with the income tax, however, maybe the beginning of perhaps one day pushing it down to zero, and that took the form of exemptions, right?
Right. One of the changes was prior to the bill that came through this year, the income tax for retirement income for senior citizens would have gradually phased out over time. Here we imposed a cap at $35,000 per individual, $130,000 per couple. That would be one of the changes that we would have. But I think over the time, what we want to do is see the actual marginal rate on income come down. That's what alters the work-leisure decision, and that's what makes Georgia more competitive going forward.
So do we stay, what is it, the maximum of 7% now? Or
6% income on income.
Okay, we stay at that point right now.
Right.
And just raise the deduction level for couples and individuals.
In that case, for retirement income for senior citizens.
Okay. Conservation easement credit revisions. I mean, that's a very technical area. How do we address that?
Well, we looked at a lot of the tax credits, both the conservation and the affordable housing credit, and made recommendations on both. I think part of the issue on the conservation easements is that as we have seen more and more land that previously might have been put into developments move toward easement, there's a sense at the state they want to make sure that we're getting a pretty good return on the tax credit there. And so what they did is they changed the amount that they cap the benefit at, as well as how you go through qualifying for that.
One of the successes, perhaps, of all this, you would have to say, is going to encourage industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, the exemption from energy, having to pay the exemption of sales tax from energy for manufacturing, agriculture, and mining interests, the exemption of sales tax for some other agricultural inputs will be pro-growth in Georgia. We have all heard many stories about manufacturing facilities that had to choose between locating in adjacent states or Georgia and had that decision made by that sales tax. In 2013 and forward, that will cease to be an issue.
Internet sales tax, that's a new area we're getting into here beyond what we already have on the books, right?
And it's a complicated one. We as a commission certainly recommended that for fairness reasons, we want to tax businesses that have nexus in the state, whether they are internet-based or not. Because of the nature of interstate commerce, I think you likely will see legal challenges to this component of the bill.
Do you think we'll ever see a change in the way we collect motor fuel taxes, Roger?
Well, that ended up being a little bit more of a challenge to change than maybe we'd anticipated. We had hoped to alter the motor fuel tax in a way that it was perhaps less dependent upon price. Over the long run, the actual consumption of gasoline on a per capita basis may come down, so that could actually end up having adverse effect for tax collections in Georgia.
Would it be fair to say that this is a work in progress? This is the first chapter of tax reform in Georgia?
I think so, and I think some people may have been a little disappointed that we did not get all of our package through. I celebrate the fact that we got some very significant changes, and this is what I hope will be the first step in moving Georgia toward a 21st century tax code.
Dr. Taro, it's always great to see you. Thanks for your work on all this.
Thank you, Scott.
And now a reminder, there's much more video and information available on our website. Extended interviews, complete shows, and live House and Senate streams are available at gpb.org/lawmakers. Also, you can like Primetime Lawmakers on Facebook and keep up with the Capitol News even before we go to air, online or off. Primetime Lawmakers is your source for all the news under the Gold Dome. And now, Primetime Lawmakers Jackie Britton joins us live for the Capitol. Other headlines from around the state. Good evening, Jackie.
Hey, Scott. Here are your state headlines for tonight. Just in time for spring and summer, the water in Lake Lanier is steadily rising as tourists return in Gainesville. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says the lake has rebounded to over 1,000 feet above sea level and is expected to climb another 1,000 feet by April 21st. Lake Lanier is also a primary water source for Metro Atlanta. The lake supervisor Mike Bergamy says the busiest season is between Memorial Day in May and Labor Day in September. And remember that rash of injuries that led to the decision for Chipper Jones to retire from baseball after this season? Well, injury has reared its ugly head once more as Braves third baseman starts his farewell season. The 39-year-old Jones was scheduled for surgery today to repair a torn meniscus in his left knee and will open the season on the disabled list. However, not to worry, Braves fans. General Manager Frank Wren says Jones should return in time for the home opener in Atlanta on April 13th against the Milwaukee Brewers. For more information on these and other stories, visit www.gpb.org/news. That will do it tonight for your state headlines. Scott, we'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks very much, Jackie. We've got to take a short break in Primetime Lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. Much more to come. I'll be joined on set by Walter Jones, Bureau Chief for the Morris News Service. Legislative analysis you won't find anywhere else on the air. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Time for our reporter discussion, part of the show where we tap our stable of the best political journalists in the state. Tonight I'm joined by Walter Jones, Bureau Chief for Morris News Service. Great to have you back as always, Walter.
Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Tax reform, just talked about it by one of the authors, Dr. Roger Taro, and he says hopefully it's the first chapter.
Well, I think even when the package came out last year, it was huge, and there were so many different working parts to it that the tax-savvy people in the legislature, and it's not a big group, but they were saying there were a lot of little reforms in it that they would love to enact too, such as just a business tax court, like the governor's setting up for the drug users and people with mental illness. They would like to do that with the businesses because it's so specialized.
And we forget that one of the goals here was to eventually do away with the state income tax in Georgia. I mean, that got lost somewhere in the shuffle, but Roger reminded us of that this evening. That's still the goal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, Governor Deal wanted to do that. Glenn Richardson, when he was Speaker, wanted to do that. The challenge is, where do you replace the money? They were hoping to have a big rainy day fund that would cushion the transition, but the recession wiped that out.
Battleship syndrome, can't turn it too fast, so we'll have to watch it happen incrementally, I guess.
Yeah.
Abortion, HB 954, limiting abortions to 20 weeks here in Georgia with rare exceptions, passes the Senate by substitute, which means it's not final passage. Here we go.
Exactly. It's funny, I don't think the change was very big. It was more of a wording change that the author, Doug McKillop, agreed to in Senate committee. But that little change is going to force another long debate and another vote in the House, and unless they just agree to it. But I'm sure there'll even be a debate over just agreeing to the report.
Two major issues still on the table: juvenile justice reform and criminal justice reform. They're separate issues, but a lot of people are amazed with the kind of juice they have behind them that they seem to be bogging down now at the last minute.
Well, it's funny, just late Friday, the attorney for the Georgia Press Association released a memo of his analysis on the criminal justice reform, and there's a portion of it that has really alarmed newspaper editors and probably other editors across the state, having to do with access to arrest records, historic arrest records. The bill sort of sets up some protections for people who I guess are innocent, but as reporters, we sort of like to have access to everything.
And then there's some pushback on the juvenile justice side for some local governments, particularly county commissioners, I believe it is, that let the governor know this is going to cost us a lot of money to enforce this. We don't have the money to do this right now. That's slowing it down.
Yeah. Well, money's always an issue, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Speaking of money, there's an interesting fundraiser going on in town. I don't want to leave the broadcast tonight without a chance for you. This is a little bit of a scoop here. The governor of Wisconsin is here to help raise a little money for the Republican Party.
Yeah, actually, it's an odd situation because the Republicans have this big annual fundraiser every year and usually bring in a big-name guest. And for some reason, the Senate did not go in session until 1 o'clock today with 31 bills on their calendar. And of course, they had to have known the debate over abortion was going to slow things down. And I don't think any of the Democrats are feeling real sorry about that.
Here they are, not raising any money. They're still arguing, or at least they're about to be. As far as SB 448 is concerned, there's been a big fight over that. I guess you'd call it the developer bailout bill, the third-party lender bill. Is that going to go anywhere in time for this session?
I think a lot of people hope that it won't. On the financial committee community, they have watered it down some so that it only applies to where a bank has been taken over by the FDIC, and that it's supposedly not retroactive, but it still creates a little bit of mischief, I think, in the eyes of a lot of the community banker types.
The last 2 days, anything big you're looking for to happen here at the last second?
I don't know that I'd call it huge, but one of the things that always happens at the end of a second year of a session is the retirements. And we've already had a few. We had Billy Horn announced last week, Stephanie Benfield, Greg Goggins, Ellie Dobbs announced today that she's retiring.
So a lengthening list.
Yeah.
One to watch. We'll watch for you to write on that. Thanks very much, Walter. Great to have you here. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, it's day 39, the penultimate day of the session. Many bills are still making their way through the process. It could come to the floor, including juvenile justice reform. Also, the Conference Committee report of the $19.2 billion 2013 budget expected on the floor of both chambers, plus all the latest news from under the Gold Dome tomorrow. Primetime Lawmakers, 7 p.m. Live coverage of tomorrow's and everyday's sessions available on our website, gpb.org/lawmakers. While you're there, check out our extended interviews and other videos. Legislative coverage available 24/7 at gpb.org/lawmakers. And while you're there, like us on Facebook too. If you missed any part of this broadcast, it repeats tomorrow morning at 5:30. Coming up next on GPB, Georgia Traveler. Tonight, the team visits tranquil Jekyll Island, tours historic buildings in Macon, remembers Fort Pulaski's role in the Civil War, plus much more. Tour the state with Georgia Traveler next on GPB. The state Senate's at a dinner break now. They'll be back at 8 p.m. this evening to finish this day, the 38th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Join us tomorrow night at 7 for the next edition of Primetime Lawmakers. Have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.